been another massive week of action in the AFLW. We're about to head into Indigenous round and we can't wait to unpack all of that here on the W Show. I am joined by AFL.com.au's women's expert, Jem Bastiani. G'day, Jem.
I'm excited to be allowed to sit down this week. Usually I'm not allowed to, but we're pretty light on the ground. Everyone's up in the top end.
They are. Jem, we are thrilled as well to be joined by one of the best in the competition in Western Bulldogs, Captain Dee Berry. Dee, thanks for coming on the W Show.
Thanks for having me. Very excited.
We're going to be chatting all things Western Bulldogs in just a little bit. But before we do that, I want to start with some news on Tasmania because it's been at the forefront of clubs' minds recently in the sense that the discussions around list concessions that Tasmania will get ahead of their entry into the competition in 2028 has started. So clubs are about to start filtering through news in terms of what that could look like. A final decision isn't expected until the AFLW draft in December. The interesting part of this, though, is that as Tasmania prepares to come into the competition, as we already know, there's already a team in the AFLW landscape called with Tasmania in their name in the North Melbourne Tasmania Kangaroos. So you might remember from the men's competition that their Tasmania agreement ended in 2025. They opted to opt out of that agreement and play 2 home games in Western Australia instead. It's my understanding that the women's program is advancing to continue the Tasmania deal into 2026 and beyond. So what that's looked like is 2 home games in Tasmania per year, 1 in Launceston, 1 in Hobart, the community stuff in and around that. But to North Melbourne at the moment is working through the naming factor and whether or not they'll continue with Tasmania in their name going into 2028, which I think, Jem, is an interesting aspect of what they're dealing with at the moment as Tasmania prepares to come into the competition.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it makes sense that they still want to have that connection with Tasmania. But the big part of the bonus part, I guess, of their connection with Tasmania was always in a state-based draft. They had first access to Tasmanian talent. Since we've had a national draft, they've lost that part of it. So it very much comes back to community home ground sort of situation rather than access to talent.
Dee, the Western Bulldogs had a great victory on the weekend. Unfortunately, you haven't been part of it though. You're still dealing with that hamstring injury. When can we expect to see you back out there?
Yeah, hopefully in the next couple of weeks. Obviously, match parameters this weekend, so a solo rehab session, gratefully, with the crew out there, and we have a really healthy list at the moment, so it means that I do have to do it by myself, but yeah, hopefully the weekend after is what I'm stemming for and up for selection then.
How many kilometres in the legs this weekend then?
I think around 8 to 10.
It's always fun.
You've bounced back from that round 1 loss, but the really interesting part is Tam Height has signed on an extension for her coaching career with the Bulldogs. She's a pretty hardline coach. We spoke about that earlier this year. What's it like balancing that with quite a young list that the Bulldogs have at the moment?
Yeah, I think Tam comes in. Obviously, she's done a great job over the last 2 years, or last year and then this year. But I think she just adds such a nice element to our group where she just wants to make sure that our relationships are really strong, and I think that's what stems onto the field as well. The girls feel comfortable in what we're trying to implement from a method standpoint, and then the girls are just really want to get behind her and lead the team to success for whatever that looks like in the near future.
Can I ask you a question? You're obviously a very young list, and the headlining that has been the number 1 pick from a couple of years ago in Christy Lewis-Turner. We haven't seen her out there so far this year. She dealt with a concussion which forced her to miss the 2 practice games. Where's she at in her development at the moment? When do you think we will see her on the park? Yeah,
obviously a bit of an interrupted pre-season hasn't helped her in that stead, but I think she's been working really hard at training and putting herself in that position to play, and I think in the near future she'll be in and up for selection. Her body's right, she's ready to go, and I think it's just training hard and showcasing exactly what she's around for, so hopefully it's not far away.
Well, you've been injured, but you haven't been doing nothing in the off-season. You have been coaching, the head coach of the Penton Hill Football Club. What's that been like? And it's been, what, 2 games that you were the head coach of?
Yeah, correct. It was challenging. I won't lie about that. I think a lot of the boys have played a lot more footy than I have. They're a lot older than what I am, but they've been great. I think the fact that they wanted me to step into that role and asked me to go along and help coach, obviously the last 5 years, but then head coach has been something that I've always wanted to do. Didn't think it'd come so soon and while I'm still playing, but really enjoyed the experience, and it's probably given me a bit more love and passion to know that that probably is something that I want to stem into post my footy career, whether it's local, it's at the professional level, whatever it is. I think I love educating what the game's about.
So you can see yourself being a coach in the future, you reckon?
Yeah, definitely. I think I love the fact that I get to showcase what I've learnt across my footy career and what I continue to learn, and then giving that to other people and showcasing exactly what footy's about is something that I'm really passionate about.
All right, well, Dee, we can't wait to see you back out there. One player who has been great to start the season is Tayla Harris. Kicked 4 goals, 4 on the weekend from 16 disposals and 8 marks. I think now Tayla Harris is the best key forward in the competition. I think she's got to that level again where she was a few years ago and a 4-time All-Australian. And it just made me think, Melbourne's now back in the premiership window, I think. Hawthorn is another side that's hoping to be in the premiership window. You might remember this Tayla trade that wasn't last year, in the sense that Melbourne told Tayla to explore her options. She came back and she found interest from Collingwood and Hawthorn. She elected to pursue that move to the Hawks. And ultimately it didn't go ahead. Melbourne, speaking right throughout that trade period, said there'd been a shift in negotiations from where they were at before the trade went through. They thought Hawthorn was going to put pick 14 on the table. They didn't ultimately do it. I wonder now if that's going to be a huge regret for the Hawks going into this year, given the form that she's been able to find at Melbourne this year. They were unwilling to put pick 14 on the table. There was a whole bunch of machinations that could have got that trade done. At one point, there was a 7-club trade in the works that would have seen Hawthorn go back from 14 to 20 in the draft and still get Tayla Harris. They were unwilling to do that because 14 wasn't moving. Jem, where do you think this is at now for the Hawks, given and where their forward line's at, and how much better it would have looked like with Tayla Harris in there? Because for me, I think that could be one they could live to regret.
Well, I think it's been magnified by the injury that Aileen Gilroy has been dealing with as well. She's been out with a hamstring. We haven't seen her at all this year. She's still another 2 weeks at least away. So that is a massive piece that's come out that could have very much been filled with a Tayla Harris, and I've got on pretty good authority that Taylor's desperate to win the Mark of the Year award this year, so she's flying at everything. But that means she's playing with confidence, and that's when Tayla plays her best footy. And I think now that's got to the point where Taylor's reintegrated herself back into that Melbourne side where she's looking to stay longer term at the Demons. She signed that 1-year deal to return, but I think she stays longer term now at Melbourne. Speaking of the Ds, some injuries on the weekend. Liv Purcell with the ACL, which was just devastating. They're going to be looking to fill their list with top-ups, we think, this weekend. Jem, where's it at with them? And where's it at with list sizes? Because clubs are being very low on their list sizes for quite a few years now. Where do you think that situation sits? Yeah, last week Port Adelaide also had to name top-ups in their emergency list for their game against North Melbourne. And it brings that conversation about list size into clear focus. The quick response is, well, we need bigger list sizes, we need more players on the list. But the realities of that are really different when it comes to looking at what the soft cap is available to them in AFLW and how that allows them to actually service these players. So the ability for an assistant coach to actually be there to service 35 players versus 30 at the moment is just not there. So I think the conversation needs to be about soft cap more than about just we need more players on a list. Dee, how hard is it to get access to those assistant coaches when they are on a limited wage, on a part-time wage for 6 months of the year? Yeah,
it's extremely tough, and I think we're pretty lucky in that sense. Like, our guys either have their own business, or Tobes and Cal are playing local footy and have just come out of the system. So they're still working out what's next for them, and we have great access to them, but I do know that there is certain clubs that don't. And it becomes really hard to learn your game, get better, and then obviously the touch element, you need your coach there. So it becomes quite tough, but yeah, I can't speak too broadly on what other clubs are like because we're incredibly lucky, but I do know that it can be quite tough.
All right, Jem, you're about to go over to the wall and back to your original position for the deep dive. Before we do that, though, it is, of course, Indigenous round this weekend and across the next couple of weeks. And one of the best Indigenous players in the competition is Danielle Ponta. She spoke to afl.com.au about what these next couple of weeks mean to her.
It's definitely something that I look forward to each and every season. It becomes more than just 2 rounds of football for me. And it's not something that should mean any less to anyone outside of our current 23 Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander AFLW players. This round, at its core, is truly about reconciliation. It's about coming together as all Australians to hear and listen, to learn and grow, and to understand the history and to move forward. It's not about the Guernsey designs or the crazy goals Eddie Betts or Buddy Franklin kicked. It's about Michael Long and the peak rule. It's about Nicky Winmar and the Guernsey lift, the Adam Goods stance. These moments didn't just change the way I feel being in this system, but how all Australians should view society, inclusive and united. Outside of us and our AFL community, it's about equality and opportunity, about ensuring that the next generation not only feels seen and heard, but truly valued. It's about creating space for every voice, every story, and every legacy that's shaped our game and our country. This round is a reminder that footy, like life, is better when we all walk forward together.
You can watch that brilliant full feature with Danielle Ponta on women's.afl or on the AFLW official app. It was, of course, launched early this week. Dee, how important as a player is it for you to play in a round like this?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important. I think us as a club, we do a lot of education around it, and I think that's probably the most important piece for us is understanding the history, the culture, and then I love seeing it replicated into jumper and through art and design, and I think we're incredibly lucky that we get to represent that.
Okay, and the football, of course, this year for the AFLW's Indigenous round puller. It was designed by Emma McNeil. So there it is there. It looks absolutely brilliant, doesn't it there? That'll be used across the next couple of weeks. All right, as we mentioned before, Jem is over at the wall for her deep dive. She's a massive Swans fan. We tried to keep her from doing the Swans for as long as possible this year, but she's finally got her way. Jem, what can you tell us about Sydney?
Sydney's surge up the ladder this year has come as a result of a heavy attacking performance in the first 2 rounds. A quarter of their forward entries have turned into goals this year, which is phenomenal conversion. And it's from 3 key parts of their game style. They're using the corridor to get the ball forward. They've got a really good mid-sized forward brigade, and they're creating space for one another. So we'll talk about the corridor ball first. The way that they're really intent, if we watch up here, they're really intent on moving the ball back into this space here to get really open opportunities inside the forward 50. So even though it's in a scramble, they're always having players moving into the corridor side of whoever the player is that gets the ball, so that it creates all of this space that they can move it into. Obviously, Chloe Molloy wins the one-on-one and kicks the goal, which obviously helps, but it's always that movement back in. So here we're watching this contest that's about to take place here, and then watch all of these players through the midfield who actually just get into that corridor side. Ball is won, takes a moment for them to realise, and then straight away they're populating this part of the ground so that when they come in, they're creating so much opportunity to come into the centre of the forward 50, which opens up the whole forward 50 for them to move into. This way, opens it up open side, plenty of space, mark inside 50, and then another mark inside 50 into that space. So we spoke last week about how getting them on a big deck is going to be really important. That is why. The other part I really like is that they've got these mid-sized forwards who kind of are midfielder forwards who can have an impact in terms of the aerial ability. They're pretty strong in the air, but on the deck they're so dangerous. And these are the 3 keys. Montana Ham is also going through the forward line as a key forward as well, but they're the ones that are really doing the damage close to goal. And lastly, the way they create space for one another is so important. Look at this space that's here and the way these forwards move to allow that space to be opened up for Chloe Molloy over here. Holly Cooper comes up at the ball and then back towards goal, knowing that this is Chloe's space to own. As soon as the mark is taken, Darcy Maloney is able to move into that as well to create a higher percentage opportunity at goal, easily lose their opposition, shot on goal. The way that they create that sort of space. This one here, I want you to watch these leading forwards down the bottom. The way that they lead up to create the gap out the back is so important. Chloe Molloy leads up at the ball, doesn't get it the first time, doesn't get it the second time, but so much space is out the back for her to actually work into. It's really smart the way that they're trying to create that space close to goal. And this last one, it's Chloe again. She's creating space for her leading forward target in Montana Ham. Watch the way she comes back towards goal, immediately identifies that Montana Ham's the one that's leading, and she blocks her opposition player. Montana Ham gets a mark inside 50 and a goal. So the way they're working for one another with a really specific intent to come through the middle of the ground is so dangerous. A quarter of their inside 50s D are coming, turning into goals. So it's a pretty dangerous attacking opposition to try and defend.
Yeah, I think obviously the fact that they do want to open up the ground and create that space is quite hard to defend, and then shifting the ball the way that they do, they're quite skillful, and then having Chloe in and out of the mid and then forward I think is quite damaging, and she's obviously a really hard player to match up against. So I think they've started the season extremely well, and I think the fact that they're trying to open the ground as much as they are, I think is quite hard to defend.
Certainly is. One side's going to have to defend them this weekend is Geelong in that clash over the weekend. Now, the Cats have been good up to a point this year in their first 2 games. They're 0-2 to start the year, but they've been falling away in final quarters, Jem. And I think they've conceded 12 goals to 1 in final quarters to start the year, which really cost them in those 2 games. What do you see as their big issue at the moment in trying to retain and stay in games for longer?
Yeah, I think their big issue really is that when they do have control, first 2 quarters against North Melbourne, first 3 quarters against Adelaide, they don't put the score on the board. They've got a pretty thin attack at the moment. It's very much Aisling Maloney or bust up there. So then when they do concede anything in the last quarter coming the other way, they get absolutely opened up and the margin just balloons out. Adelaide kicking 7 goals straight in the last quarter also didn't help them. No. But it is a dangerous attack that they have to defend this week, and if they are vulnerable in the last quarters, I'm a little bit worried about them.
We were worried about Brisbane last week.
You were worried about Brisbane last week.
I was worried personally about Brisbane last week, and they came over and absolutely thrashed Fremantle. Does it say more about the Lions or the Dockers? And are you worried about the Dockers, Jem?
I am definitely worried about the Dockers this weekend. The way that they get opened up on transition footy, which we saw against Brisbane on the weekend, the way Brisbane was able to just go end to end with very little impact or difficulty in stopping was really concerning, especially given they're playing North Melbourne this weekend. And we know North Melbourne are a very good end-to-end transition team. Dee, are you worried about the lack of defence happening through the middle of the ground here?
Yeah, I think it's definitely eye-opening, and I'm sure Freo had a look at this during the week and will go to work on how they can defend that, especially coming up against North Melbourne. So it's obviously a big learning point for those girls, and I think they'll come out wanting to defend the corridor and make sure that they can get that overlap run stop. But yeah, I think if anything in footy, it's a learning
experience.
It certainly is. So Brisbane's back. Another powerhouse in the competition is Adelaide, who we had our concerns about last week. And we spoke about Chelsea Randall and how she missed the first game of the season to be at an overseas wedding. She showed us exactly how important she was, though, over the weekend. Kicked 3 goals and had a really huge say in that final quarter.
I think what she is so important at is connecting their lines, that she's able to actually bring other players into the game and everyone kind of rises around her. So, yes, she kicked 3 goals, but then her ability to actually connect, get Eloise Jones into the game, players like that. You've seen her play, Dee, for a long, long time. You're both inaugural players. How good is Chelsea Randall?
Yeah, she's so damaging, and I think she's another player so unpredictable to play against. She's either going to fly and take a screamer over your head, or she's going to run back and kick 3 goals like she did on the weekend. She's so damaging, and like you said, like the fact that she can connect all girls on their list and then between lines is so important. I think that's why they love her, and I think she's definitely a great add for round 2.
All right, it's going to be a massive round 3 coming up. Let's have a look at the plethora of games that is on action. It all starts on Friday night. Dream time up there in Darwin. That's why Sarah Black isn't here. She's up there in Darwin covering that one between Richmond and Essendon. But some really mouth-watering games there. I'm sure you'll be there on Saturday night, of course, Dee, for the Western Bulldogs against Hawthorn. It's going to be a massive test.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the girls have put in a mountain of work this week. We'll have another training session to get underway, but I think we're super excited to see what we can showcase against a quality opposition, and our method will stand strong, and if we can play that for 4 quarters, I think we can be quite hard to play against.
It was exciting on the weekend in the way you played and the way you responded from the first up defeat and beat Richmond on the weekend. I mean, how much enthusiasm does that give to a young group going forward?
I think it's just reward for effort, and know that exactly what we've been training all pre-season and to last year as well, that our method works, and I think the fact that we got the win just gives us that confidence to continue to play the way that we want for 4 quarters.
All right, so Friday night's game is Essendon Richmond. That's the Dreamtime game. One player who won't be there is the Bombers' co-captain Bonnie Toogood, copping a 2-match suspension for this dangerous tackle. She challenged it at the AFLW tribunal earlier this week and was unsuccessful. That was upheld. She still travelled to Darwin though, but I think what we've seen, particularly in men's footy over the last couple of years, is when you pin the arms, you run the risk, don't you, Jem?
You absolutely run the risk, and a lot of people making comparisons to the Paul Curtis situation earlier this year, which is probably a fair comparison, especially given Bonnie got given the free kick as a result of that tackle. All
right, a massive round 3 coming up this weekend. Don't forget, you can get all of your tickets on women's.afl and the Women's AFL app. Dee, thank you so much for your time on the couch today. Good luck for the rest of the season. We can't wait to see you back out there.
Thanks for having me.
And Jem, well done on the couch today.
Thank you.
Keep clicking back to women's.afl for all the latest. And we'll see you next week.